And here's what I want to share in the mindset portion of today. All you mind right maniacs out there, my theme for mindset today is who's on your pit crew? Who's on your pit crew? You got to create your pit crew. Now, I share this because as I record this, just after the Daytona 500 ran, congratulations, William Byron, the winner of the Daytona 500. The only sport, by the way, I was teaching my daughter McKenna that only in auto racing do you have the Super Bowl first. See, the Daytona 500 is recognized as the biggest race in NASCAR of the year. Not that I'm a huge NASCAR or auto racing guy, but I like watching it, and I appreciate what those entire crews and teams do. But I was watching the Daytona 500, and it made me think of something that one of the speakers said just the other day when I was at this event on scaling your teams. This speaker, her name was Diana Kander. She said, you got to make sure you have the right pit crew around you. I'm like, I like that. You got to make sure you have the right pit crew around you. Now, one thing I do know is this, and having a relationship somewhat with the Joe Gibbs racing team, meaning I played football, college football with J.D. Gibbs, bless his heart and soul. J.D. passed away, but J.D. ran Joe Gibbs's racing team for many years. You realize the importance of a pit crew to a team winning. And when William Byron won the race the other day, he got out of his car and he got onto the hood of his car and he jumped into about 10 of these guys who caught him, and they were celebrating with such exuberance and energy that it showed the camaraderie that's necessary for the team and the driver that is going to take success. And it made me think about who's on your pit crew. Who's on your team that celebrates your successes with you? And I know my son Luke, he went to Joe Gibbs's team. He went to the actual shop last year, and he saw some of the men on the pit crew working out, and they were going through all of their drills. And the precision that these men work with is absolutely incredible. So it made me think about, for you and for me, who's on your pit crew? You got to create your pit crew. You got to create your pit crew. Like the difference between seconds or nanoseconds, microseconds, I'm not talking months or years, but when you think about the decisions you need to make right now in your life at any level, personally, professionally, who's on your pit crew? Are you dealing with a winning pit crew, or are you dealing with a losing pit crew? People who are not precise, people who are not operating on the highest level where seconds can make a difference, where you're working, you're like, oh, Todd, getting all altruistic on us. No, but the truth is, are you around winners? Are you around losers? How do you get around more winners? And, when you ask yourself, who can help me do this? Not how can I do this? Who can help me do this? It brings the thought of that book, Who Not How. Like, who is it that can help you get done what needs to get done? Because your successes often become the box. Like, hey, you got to think outside the box. If you want to be successful, think outside the box. Well, what about when your successes become the box and you can't think outside the box any longer? It made me think about there was a story that this gal, Diana, had shared in her talk where a hospital emergency room. Now imagine the chaos and craze inside of a hospital ER. But it showed that they actually weren't operating, pardon the pun, with maximum efficiency. They actually brought in a IndyCar pit crew. Now, IndyCar is much different than NASCAR. I do know that, depending on your level of auto racing. But IndyCar is a completely different beast. But they brought an IndyCar pit crew in to evaluate them. They watched them, they observed them, and then the IndyCar pit crew applied the principles and knowledge that they use in IndyCar racing to the emergency room. Now imagine that. Like, what does an IndyCar or even a NASCAR pit crew have to do with operating inside of an emergency room? Well, think about it. Life and death is on the line. And I know when I saw this accident at the end of the Daytona 500, McKenna was like, my daughter was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this. And cars were flipping over, and within seconds they had the emergency crew there, and they go into the pit crew, and within like 2 minutes these cars were completely unbended, and they were back put together, and they were pulling scrap metal off and all this other stuff. It made me think about the importance of your pit crew. Like, who can help me get outside my box? Like, how do you get trapped inside of the box the way you think, right? And whether it's personally, whether professionally, when you have the right people on your pit crew, then all of a sudden you can start to think outside your box, and people can help you execute that. So here's the top ahas that you can get from my little who's on your pit crew thing. Number one, you got to have the right pit crew. Do you have the right pit crew? And if you don't, who do you need to replace on your pit crew because they ain't pulling their weight, pardon the pun. Number two, you don't have to be an expert, but be an innovator. Be an innovator. Like, maybe you've been in the field like myself for 25 years, and you can be an expert in fitness and sports training and everything else, but how do you continually innovate? Heck, the podcast, we launched this thing over 5 years ago, is how do I innovate? How do I reach more people like you mind rate maniacs, fire-breathing dragons? How do you continue to innovate to get your message out there even longer? Because if your mission, your divine purpose is to motivate, inspire more people to greatness, get to their maximum level, how do you innovate more? Your pit crew is going to share with you and tell you what can be done. And number three is think of your 2.0 version or your 3.0 version. Maybe right now you're in a state of transition from one career to another career, or one aspect of life to another. Heck, a couple of years ago, I shared in my transition of going to the 2.0 version of what I was doing there in my previous regime of Fitness Quest 10 and operating that to, I no longer wanted to operate Fitness Quest 10. I wanted to still be very much a part of it, but I wanted to create my vision, and my 2.0 version of me was in leading my organization, Impact X Performance, in scaling that vision. The pit crew that was going to be necessary was going to be different, because if you want to get to someplace you haven't been, you can't keep doing what you've always done to get to somewhere you want to go. Y'all catch that? So if you want to go somewhere new, you can't keep doing what you've always done to get to where you want to go. You got to find new people that can help you with your 2.0 version. Doesn't mean that you have to necessarily leave behind everything. Heck, I'm still at FQ10, but my pit crew is different. That's helping me scale Impact X Performance on that. Along with number four, find your blind spots. And Diana Kander talked about this. And man, here's the thing. If for 6 months or a year or 3, you've been doing the same thing and you're beating your head against the wall thinking, man, I just can't get to that next level, then you need to have someone else, a mentor, a coach, your pit crew, your inner circle, call what you want, help you discover and find your blind spots. Because if your blind spots don't allow you to get outside of the box, then you're always going to be stuck inside of the box. Don't revert back to mediocrity thinking, man, like I'm not built for this. This is where that head trash and that stinking thinking come into play. And you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Stop the silly thinking of like, I don't know if I can do this. You just got to recognize your blind spots, get around the right pit crew, get around the people who are going to call an ace and ace, a spade of spades. And then you can actually go identify your blind spots and do something about them. Why? Because point number 5 is, what lies am I telling myself is the question. You got to ask yourself, are you telling yourself any lies? Are you continually telling yourself the same story or sharing the same narrative that you've been saying over and over again? Why? Because I want to help you get outside of the box. I want to help you get unstuck with your blind spots. When I say, hey, create your pit crew, who's on your pit crew here in the mindset? It's a mindset because perhaps we need to change the narrative. Just today, no joke, I was in the trenches training an athlete, and I said, stop telling yourself that. Stop telling yourself that, because this athlete, football player, was telling me that as he was bench pressing, I don't know, man, I think I'm too old for this. I said, stop. What do you mean you're too old for this? Stop. I'm 53 years old. I'm like, You ain't too old for this. You're going to be in your 50s and 60s someday. We're going to be doing the same darn thing. Like, you ain't too old for this. But if you keep telling yourself the same narrative, guess what? You start believing it and you start performing like it. Then you will be too old because you get cut. So that's the narrative. Like, be careful of the stories you keep telling yourself, because the stories become your narrative. Your narrative, you start believing it because the 60 to 80,000 thoughts that you have a day, if you start telling yourself you're too old, you don't feel good, you're not smart enough, I don't know if I'm built for this, I don't know if I can go through all this again. Stop the silly talk, the stinking thinking. No. So be careful of that. What lies are you telling yourself? It doesn't mean you're not getting older, but you got to make sure that you do everything you can, that you're telling yourself the right story about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And then last point is don't be stuck in just traditional wisdom. Don't be stuck in traditional wisdom. I'm a huge believer in looking back, and you can reflect upon all your wins and all the good things. I was actually doing that this morning as I'm recording this. It's my 24th wedding anniversary. That's kind of crazy. I've been married 24 years. And I was looking back on pictures. I'm like, man, we've had some really good times in 24 years. But man, we don't want to get stuck in just the past. Like, I also want to look forward to the next 24 years and what destinations and vacations and things are we going to do in the next 3 years, let alone 24 years. Don't get stuck in traditional wisdom of just going back and saying, oh, the way it used to be is the way it should be. If you're stuck in the 90s or the 80s or the early 2000s, you ain't going to win today. And I want to make sure that we win today on that. And that's why I say, like, a great mantra is, today is day one. Today is day one. And I was literally on a phone call just prior to me recording this after my training session with our team at Impact X Performance. I said that exact same thing, is today is day one. Now, you got to have every day, you got to come to bat with a new attitude of, like, today's day one. It's a new day. What are we going to do to maximize the day? There's no doubt change is inevitable. No doubt. But growth is optional. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen. But growth is optional. And when I talk about creating your pit crew, who's on your pit crew? You want people on your crew that are going to help you grow, not just change. It's one thing to change, but how do we change and get better with optimal growth? You know, there's this video that I saw in this talk, which was really cool. It was the person on the vault in gymnastics who in the 1950s won the gold medal. And when this woman won the gold medal, the actual routine looked so ridiculously easy. And she compared it to the gold medal from the 1950s to Simone Biles' gold medal winning performance in the last Olympics. And it was light years ahead of, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that an athlete could do something so amazing here in what was 2024 in the Olympics. Like, wow, that is incredible what this woman did. And you're like, man, but that's only, like, when you think about 70 years or so that had gone by, like, where are things going? And what we know today isn't where we're going to be in 5-10 years from now, let alone 50 or 70 years from now. Growth is optional. Change is inevitable. And I challenge you with the mindset, who's on your pit crew? Make the decisions this week as you listen to the Impact Show today. I just want to make sure that your pit crew, your 5 or 10 people that every day you're going to train with, that you're going in to be precise with, that you're making decisions with your business with, and your life is dependent on it. Like, that you have the right people on your crew. So, my friends, the mindset tip of the day, make sure that you create your right pit crew. And whatever you do, you make sure you got the right crew that you're hanging with all the time.